Right. I was trying to think of where to start because I had so many tack on questions to what we started with the other night. But I
Right.
was trying to think of what would be the best like springboard point, and really, it was just kind of where we left off that I could think on uh, what would be good to start. I first of all, I have no education whatsoever. I am not a like philosopher or
Mm.
in any way post high school educated. So it's just me musing and wandering through the world and collecting thoughts as I go. So
Yeah.
if I stumble with my words and terminology, that's why.
Hey man, I haven't graduated from anything in my life, so I'm right there with you.
Okay. I just didn't want to give off the thought that I know anything because I don't. I wonder some things, but we were talking. You were talking about. I'm trying to think of what the best way to say it was. The idea that. Okay, I'm trying to put my thoughts back where I was going to start from last night. You were talking about the whole thing that God could. Okay, never mind. I remembered. I wasn't feeling the flow. What I really wanted to say. So we started off with the question that I had, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. But then it got more into what you were actually posting on here, which was life after religion. I think there's a lot of good that can be found there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in complete removal of those old gifts from life. I think there can
Right.
be a new life breathed back into them. You asked a question though that I was trying to remember exactly how you worded it. Something to the effect of like, how did you say it? It was something like, how do we help people
Mm.
um,
Well, the question
when they're
I've
coming
been,
out of it? Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
the question that I'm kind of bouncing around in my head is I don't think the goal is to get people out of religious institutions. I think the goal is to get people out of that religious mindset.
Right.
And I don't really think that that's been addressed a whole lot here. Either you're in or you're out, and that
Right.
sort of automatically puts you in a couple of different camps. You had a good point, and I agree with you that people who have a faith crisis or a religious crisis um, can have a lot of growth and be reintegrated into whatever practice they're in. And I think that's good as long as there's growth and progress.
Right.
But I
Well,
think the main thing
okay.
is just
So
creating sort of a
go ahead.
system of support so people can leave or stay, but either way, facilitate growth and not spiral out of control or into despair or whatever.
Sure. And I think one of the things that a lot of people get hung up on is this idea of what growth looks like, that it's supposed to somehow mean you never look back, or you never say the old things that you used to say, or you can't be affiliated with people who do, or anybody who does that old thing you used to do is somehow wrong. And I think that
Hmm.
that's actually a backward step. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad one because we can learn from all steps, but in that generous mindset I'm trying to apply, I think encouraging an acceptance for people's path and what they've gone through, regardless, is big time helpful.
Yeah.
And to allow them to accept what they experience from their religious falling as part of their progress can be helpful. So when you were
Hmm.
talking about the whole God punishing with gifts and teaching with, I don't know how the right words were, but basically that the gifts are the difficult part and
Hmm.
um, the punishment is the other one. That flipping of the script to me was indicative of what I'm reaching for here.
Hmm.
Essentially seeing the failures of the religious path and the struggle as the presence, as the gift,
Hmm.
and the things that make us comfortable as kind of our prisons.
Yeah. There's a story in Owaspy, the book I referenced last night, of the story takes just a little background of Owaspy. It has stories that would be taking place in a heavenly realm.
Yes.
Um, and I think the stories are mainly there for a vehicle to convey the principles. And so the principle is what we're talking about. And so the story goes like this. There is a administrator of the world under the title of God, and one of the sub-gods, an assistant, decides to create his own heaven with his own doctrine and his own followers and the whole kit and caboodle. And in so doing, breaks the connection to the Creator. And the actual legitimate God knows the end result is going to be basically creating a type of hell. That this sort of self-appointed God doesn't have the foresight to be able to see this disaster of a decision. And so the legitimate God tries to offer counsel, and it's not heeded. And so the true God goes to the Creator and asks for advice. And the Creator's like, follow your highest light, follow your path, so you can either talk to him again or not. But know this. This is the Creator's advice to the God. His path is his own, and whatever he decides will lead to the highest good, even if it takes 2,000 years or more. And so what happens, the God, the subordinate God, self-appointed, creates his own heaven with his own basically spiritual slaves, and eventually it all falls apart. Basically turns it into a hell. And his friend, the true God, eventually is given the green light to rescue them all from hell and to show them the true light of the Creator. And humbled and quite a little bit humiliated, the false God comes to his senses and asks for repentance. I never should have had this heaven I created. I never should have taken these subjects as slaves. I'll do whatever it is I can do to be on the right path again. And the Creator comes back with, you wanted a heaven? You wanted these subjects? I'm going to give them to you. This time you're going to be connected with me. I'm going to teach you how to raise up your believers, your followers, to my realm. You're not getting out of it. These are consequences that you have, but I'm here to support you. I'm here to teach you and to but this time in the light instead of the darkness. I think that's a really good illustration of, yes, punishment for consequences and choices, but not being abandoned.
Hit the wrong button there. So I'm trying to think of how to say all this because I've got so many thoughts. It's amazing what's happened to me over the past couple of years. I was raised Christian.
Okay.
Non-denominational, basically believe Jesus, get baptized, you're good. Be a good person. Very basic. They didn't get into deep doctrine questions. I had no idea there were so many Bibles that were considered controversial that everybody considers to be just normal, whatever,
Right.
King gold standard for our parents, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But when I walked away from the church, I never thought that antiquated speech would make sense to me the way that it has over the past couple of years. And it's so bizarre. I went completely into the woods. I became pagan, studying the occult, getting into all that, and I still consider myself part of that path. But because of the generosity that I've tried to apply to the thinking around each of these different paths, every time people will bring a story like that now, I see why it can make sense. I can see the yes in it. And like that, I'm trying to figure out how to say it because All I know, this is the other difficulty. My nomenclature, my nomenclature isn't the right word. My vernacular, my common speech is Christian
Hmm.
speech. Even though I'm not a Christian,
Yeah.
I with those words, so they're comfortable in my mouth. So now I've
Hmm.
said blasphemy with my whole chest more than I ever did in my life before in the past couple of months, because I'm like, I know what that means now, and you guys are doing it.
Yep.
And it's ironic because it's the smallest thing of trying to understand, in my opinion, I may be off, but to say that we know what God wants or what God thinks, to me, is blasphemous. To even
Right.
suggest that we could want that or we could think that. And likewise, these allegories and symbols of heaven and battles and what sin is and all of this stuff, it's like we had this very small, cracked peephole view down a long hallway painted over yellow through to a world of understanding. And we're like, I know what it is
Hmm.
now. I know exactly what it means, and this is what it means for all time. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, maybe a
Yeah.
piece of it. But when I think about it generously, I can think how all of that can apply in a myriad of ways to every moment of life. The concept of creating a separation, the God creating a separation between itself and the whole or the all or whatever, that serves as a form of punishment or hell, when you don't think of that as pitchforks and lakes of fire and upset Sky Daddy, and you think of it something a little more nuanced than that, of
Hmm.
just being separate from the whole, it can all fit in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
So I know it's considered heresy by almost every Christian that I've ever run up to with this concept. And even some of the spiritualists that I'll talk to, they're like, yeah, that's just heresy. I'm like, I'm not really concerned who thinks it's heresy. To me, it makes sense.
Right.
Like, brand me heretic. I'm here for it.
Hmm.
So when I heard you saying the things you did, it seemed so contrary to what the zeitgeist says in the Christian world, that I was like,
Yeah.
I need to talk to this guy, because I think we have some similar open mindedness to the symbols, to the allegories. And I think they're in there with the right open mind. There can be some real big steps
Yeah.
um, back towards a cohesion with that antique, that I'm stumbling with my words, with that old system that served for so long for a reason. I don't think that it's invaluable. I think people have just misused it. And I don't think it's the only answer.
Yeah. I
It's a
think.
tool.
Yeah. I definitely think the system has been abused to the advantage of or disadvantage of the masses. You were talking about growth and what does that look like? To me, growth, one of the signs that you have started that journey is one, your curiosity comes back and you're no longer prioritizing being right. Prioritizing being right as in, I'm going to make sure that you know you're wrong. So those two things, curiosity and sort of letting go. Of course, everybody wants to have the best information. That's how we can make good choices, but letting go of the need for fighting over it. I think that's a good. And the other thing is letting go of labels, because when I think of the path I'm on, a lot of the beliefs I have and a lot of the practices I have are very much what would be considered witchcraft or pagan if you want labels on stuff. I celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes, and if I was in a community, we would worship in a circle, and we use creation as an expression to honor the creator, which can look like a lot of different things. I had somebody recently describe it like this: when you're after the pure light of knowledge that goes to the source, when you tap into that, you have a whole new perspective on on one in one direction. You see the source of the knowledge, and then you turn around and you see that light hit a prism and break up into so many colors. And those colors are part of the source, but they're distinct and they are different from each other. And that's religion and culture and all of it. it doesn't have to be like we don't have to be disconnected from each other if we just recognize that we are actually connected to the source, even though we don't believe all the same things. And what faithism is an attempt to recognize that the prism exists and has fractured everything, but recognize that everything is still connected to the Creator, and try and live in the white light, the truth, and not fight with all the colors. That's basically my perspective and the perspective of faithism as a whole, I think.
Yeah, I like it. There's so many like partial points that I want to jump into, and then I'm like, well, is that the right one at this time, or is there a better one?
Just do
Like
it.
you
Just
said,
anything.
the idea of accepting other people's paths as part of the whole, and that was one of the things that I struggled with for a while, was trying to figure out how I'm supposed to accept like evil. Like they talked about the problem of evil in philosophy, or people that do things that I don't agree with, and I was like, why does it have to be bad that their role in this play is one that I'm not supposed to agree with? Why does it have to be considered evil that there are seasons, and there is night and day, there's push and pull, there's a time for this and that, to use the was it Corinthians? A time for war, a time for peace, blah 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 blah. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I can't remember where that one's at.
Yeah.
Just to know.
I know Corinthians for another reason, but I can't remember if that's where that one is. But anyways, that whole thing. And if I think about this from a non-dualist Advaita Vedanta perspective, it's like they're all parts of the play as well. And I don't necessarily have to embrace the bad guy when I'm watching a movie and there's a bad guy.
Right.
But to let it destroy me inside either. Like there's a balance to that. I'm going to get meshed up in a whole bunch of too many thoughts. I'm trying to nail it down to one thing. I'm excited because you're saying things that go along with what I'm saying.
Can I interject something? I don't want to ruin your train of thought, but can I interject something?
Totally.
Okay. So this idea of good and evil is a little different. Take from a faithist perspective. Everything can be compared to a tree or garden, but a tree is a good expression. It starts out as a seed, and then it goes through the stages of maturity and eventually bears fruit. Well, the fruit also has a cycle of being kind of unripe and going through the phases till you get to ripe. It's basically the stages of maturity. Now, Christianity would consider some actions to be sinful and worthy of eternal death. In Oahspe, in faithism, you only have things that are considered unripe or ripe, or somewhere in the middle. So being in a state of unripeness doesn't mean you're not still going towards the Creator. It just means that that's the stage you're in. Right. Eventually, your fruit will ripen up. So there is no need for condemnation and punishment. Your journey is unique to you, and you may have to have a long period of unripeness before your life ripens up.
Right.
And it's all part of the journey.
That's it. When you use that analogy, I just brought that. I tried to write a little statement about it. I don't know if I've got it handy, actually. We were talking about another subject the other day, and it was basically somebody was saying, well, we all recognize that this is failing as of right now. And I was like, well, is it though? Or is it just a part of it? And let's see if I can find it. I wrote something about it, and I wanted to. Yeah, a branch bark a pile of leaves, while failures in the fall, as husks of seed discarded deep, successes soon enthrall. Because even though those are seen as failures, and they're literal death and rot, and the failing of all the dreams of the tree, they're also part of the cycle, they're part of the food, they're part of everything. So you don't hate the tree because it's ugly and gross and stinky in the fall and everything starts to rot. Likewise, when things go through their cycles, you can appreciate them for the cycle they're in. You can treat them for what they're good for, use them for what they're good for, avoid the things that aren't good, and not let it become like your sole mission to remove the world of those things.
Right.
You can embrace them in the way that they're meant to be embraced. You can
life comes
function
from death. Like
Yes.
A seed cannot produce a plant until it physically dies.
Right.
It's all part of the cycle. It just goes in a circle. It's kind of like the show Wheel of Time. It just going in cycles,
Right.
big big cycles and small cycles.
I agree. And ironically, there's a cyclic nature to it. And I think, no, not ironically, I use that word too much. I feel like there's room for coming back, as I was saying last night, like the prodigal son kind of a concept, to old beliefs and breathing new life into them. I think returning to it in the way that we used it as children and as people before we expanded our knowledge might be a little bit less than beneficial, unless that's necessary or useful to you at the time. But I think the hope would be you would go away from home, gain some wisdom, and come back a better person to use the tools more wisely. And I think that can be a thing. I think people get stuck thinking, oh, that means I have to bow down and worship and go back to the same things that I worked so hard to walk away from. I'm like, not exactly. What if you learn to integrate and realize those tools never left you in some way, and now you can use them in a whole new way where it doesn't have to be your identity. It can be a part of your tool belt.
So my wife and I actually considered doing this after we left Christianity, after we became faithists. We really wanted to have a community, someplace that felt a little bit like home, someplace where we could be accepted and make friendships and share our lives together. And it would be a unique situation to be able to come back to, for us, Christianity, and find that connection, not being Christian. Because there seems to be a culture of a value proposition where Christians, and this is my whole life, I mean, I'm guilty of it my whole life, have a value system. So if you're not a Christian, you're very valuable as a potential convert. And if you are a Christian, you're very valuable because you're inside the group.
Right.
But if you're not a candidate for being converted, you're not really welcome in the group. There seems to be a place where your value goes to zero. And I'm not saying that's like 100% it across the board, but it feels from the experiences that I've had, it feels like there is a place where there is a zero value.
I think that's a human issue. That's one of the things I've been trying to figure out how to sneak in, is that I think a lot of the failings we want to put on religion are actually human problems. And we're going to do that anytime we get into a group, whether it's philosophy or religion or politics or whatever. There's going to be this great altruistic, everything's going to work out. We're going to make it work this time, put it together. Hey, chicken. Just saying hi to my friend there. But we're going to put everything together in the right order this time, right? And every time humanity does what humanity does, and we get into groups and we start picking each other apart for this, that, and the other thing. That's actually hilariously why one of the things that pops back up into my mind when I was kind of re-embracing the terminology of Christianity again was it's a personal walk. Yeah. It's a personal relationship. And I think that's a big deal. I think a lot of people want to find like this understanding of the text or this thing they can say everybody's supposed to do. And I don't think that was ever the intention at all. I think it was always supposed to be you and your God every single time, that nobody else. And every time we try to put it on somebody else as, no, you got to do what I'm doing, we've drawn that line around God. We've built a box for him. We've blasphemed. And we've built a hell. We've built a place where only God can be and everything else is bad, or vice versa. We think that's where God is, but we've actually built ourselves a little prison of words, and nobody else can come in unless they agree. That, in a way, is a form of hell. And since in Heidegger speak, you can only experience eternity in time. To God, a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day, all these analogies, right? Then we're literally experiencing hell by our own choosing, by building this perceived construct around where God can and cannot be.
Yeah.
Until we open that door and let it back in and accept the world. It's so, just like, oh shit.
If what you're saying, the point where the value of somebody is zero within whatever group we're talking about. It's a human condition problem. How do we change that? How do we make groups comfortable with people? I'm not comfortable going back into a group just for the sake of, like, I don't know. I don't think I would feel comfortable reintegrating myself into a group where I know for sure that nobody wants me there.
I
Like, I
don't
don't
know
see
that
the
group is
point.
the answer. I don't think
Huh?
a group is the answer. If
Well,
anything, the community would be a community of people that allow people to do what they need to and encourage them on their path. That's why I found a home in witchcraft, because they embraced me in that way. They
yeah.
didn't tell me, read this book or follow this rule. They said, we are here to support you on your path and we believe in you. We believe that you will find your way, and
Yeah.
whatever is right for you, we're here for you.
I think you're, yeah, that's absolutely right. My wife and I don't have any plans of going back to we actually plan on eventually establishing a group of faithists that are on a similar level of growth and curiosity and knowledge seeking and um, yeah, maybe the answer is just is the people who are on this path need to find each other and create our own communities, our own groups. I
Well,
think once we stop putting so much attention and also like attention fighting against Christianity is also putting a lot of attention on it. Once we just
yes.
walk away with unmaliced hearts just so we can find our own path and meet others along the way, enough of that happens, and the money goes away, the attention goes away, and their apparent need becomes exposed as no need at all for these groups to
Right.
exist.
Well, it's amazing to me too, because this whole TikTok experiment has been a microcosm of that in so many ways, where you'll walk into a room and you'll see people at each other's throats, and what does it do? It draws like flies to a pile. Everybody's
Hmm.
in there. They want to be a part. They want to watch it. I'm a victim of it and partaker of it. I find myself today addicted to watching people go at it and wanting to hear them tear each other's ideas apart. And then I realized what I was doing. I was like, that's funny. I was feeding my ego today. But the minute people start talking about things that actually do progress, unless it's really uh, tasty, like really new tech or something like that, most people don't have the energy to come in there and pick it apart. Even if they try, if they don't get that
Hmm.
pushback, they leave.
Yeah.
That energy
Oh,
goes away
yeah.
like an armor
Yeah.
of truth. It's wild. It's
Yeah,
amazing. So
it's like
I,
bug repellent.
yeah. So I've embraced, and it's so weird how it's worked. I almost don't want to jinx myself saying it out loud. On my page, when I do my books, right? And fight. when
No, no.
when I'm doing my
Saul,
books,
you are the fighter amongst the group. You have a way of being able to bob and weave with courage and
yeah, but
intelligence
Saul
that
can
I
also
just,
walk into a room of people ready to tear each other to shreds and calm it within
yeah,
minutes. He
that's
likes to
true.
stir
I
the pot
mean,
afterwards, but he can do it, and
yeah,
it's amazing. Um,
I can't keep
no,
up with
but
all that now.
when I'm doing my books, right, and I've got a bunch of people that'll come in and watch me every night, and for the most part, I don't get the trolls because I don't feed them. I don't bark
Hmm.
back. If somebody gets too egregious, I remove them from the live, which has only happened a handful of times. And I don't engage in like political discussions or things that are abrasive on my videos. At least I try not to. I do some stuff that's a little bit funny in my
Hmm.
opinion, but nothing that's abrasive too far. And that's worked out really well. So similarly, I've tried to look for people who are more interested in holding out the lantern, so to speak, and encouraging
Hmm.
people on their own path, whatever that path may be, embracing their successes and their failures, especially their failures, as lessons, as gifts, as things to share with
Hmm.
others, because I really believe there's something to the idea, especially with what we're talking about with old religion, that it's supposed to fail. I mean, just built into the idea of Christianity is this story of a perfect God who built a world that was supposed to fail.
Yeah.
What? Like everybody fights about that. I'm like, nudge, wink. It was supposed to fail. And then all you have
Well,
to do is say
and
yes and you're good.
this perfect God made so many mistakes. Like if people would just read the book, like it was never as a perfect system from the very beginning. It seemed like there was a mistake on page one.
Right.
So
It was, yeah.
it seems to be the pattern.
Yep.
Um, from an Owaspy perspective, that's part of the plan is to have these cycles. And it's like every cycle that goes around, you have sort of like an industrial, enlightened, philosophical, this kind of cycle of civilization. And if you begin the cycle at ground zero and you come back to the very beginning of the cycle and you're at like, let's say 10 or 15, the cycle has repeated, but there is growth there overall. And yeah, I think religion is part of that. It has made some pretty significant contributions on both sides of good and bad, but everything that has happened has been for our benefit that we can learn from. And when the cycle is complete, we will be better off having had it and also having walked away from it.
And in some ways, it's difficult language because people will bring up very unfortunate and uncomfortable situations we go through in life, and they'll say, how did we grow from that? What did we gain from that? And it's hard to say at this point how to frame that in a way that works with those follow-up words. What did we grow from? But all I know is that we're here experiencing it, and I can find things to reach for that are good even amongst the bad things. And I prefer that.
Yeah.
The more that I do that, the more I see the world echoing back that. And the more I reach for the other, the more I see it echoing back that. And so I'm trying to pursue what I want to see more of.
Yeah. Yeah, because you create what your attention is where your energy goes, and that's,
Right.
Everything. You're basically creating your own reality.
Right.
That's TikTok, you're talking about it being a microcosm of reality. Like, if you want to fight, you'll get a fight.
Yep.
All you have to do is want it, and it's there.
You don't even have to want it. You just have to talk about it. Not even have your phone open. Talk about it in your spare time with the phone in your pocket, and it's listening. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see a lot of potential for open minds with some of the things that you were bringing about. And I really wish I could nail down, there was something really specific about what you said that I wanted to focus in on and hear your thoughts. Because I don't think I heard it right. Maybe we'll just try to round about it and see where we land. Did you say something like God punishes with peace and happiness and joy and gifts or something, and rewards with challenges or something to that effect?
I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but I know that I can give you the principle of it. So I'm going to use the term creator because I distinguish between the many pantheons of gods and the creator.
Sure.
The creator gives all of us the opportunity of free will. I really believe free will is a thing.
I do too. I'm glad to hear you say that. I actually have a stick in my craw about the determinism. We'll go into that later.
Yeah. So we have free will.
Yeah.
And that a lot of the time in the short term has a lot of negative consequences because it's a learning process. Like the story I shared with you of the interaction between the true God and the false God and the whole deal. There was no punishment other than natural consequences. The only intervention was of guidance and eventually rescue. Now here on Earth, Owaspy talks about everybody having like a radio. So our conscience is like a radio. And
Okay.
whether or not we are tuning into it directly or not, we are getting the signal of inspiration from the divine. So we are constantly being encouraged and inspired to know the difference between the dark and the light, to know the power of love. And once you see the, once you get a glimpse, then that's when you start slowly turning the dial to get it more focused and more focused. And you're able to be more receptive, and you're able to see the difference between consequences of being selfish and consequences of being selfless. And you're able to start having that judgment for yourself. You are judging yourself in your life, and you are in charge of your life, and you are responsible for growing yourself. But we're never left in the dark without some sort of inspiration to point us to the light, so we can tell what's dark and what's light.
Right.
And that's what that passage basically meant, is the Creator only gives us the resources for growth and knowledge. He allows the darkness to exist so we can grow, and he gives us the tools to recognize the darkness and the light.
Right.
That's the gist of it.
One of the things I think we often, almost always struggle with is that we use really old terms to try to define something bigger than we can measure. And we try to mix that with like our current understanding of physics and reality and whatever. Mm-hmm. But like the mixture of like light and dark, for example, good and evil, sin, all of that, I think those are so weighted and what's the word? Two-natured, multivocal. They don't just have one meaning. They can be applied different ways, right? Yeah. And so when we try to slap it together into a sentence that gives us a direction, it's almost refuted the minute we say it, because it has too many conflicting elements, especially given where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's where we have endless battles in philosophy.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to say it, man.
We need a new vocabulary.
We do. Great. I keep trying to put it into this poetic thing and saying religion needs a new pair of shoes. That's one of the ones I wanted to get to, actually. Let me say that real quick before I forget it. I'm sad that everybody's afraid of the word religion. All it means is to rebind, to bring back together. It's a formulation of mouth sounds that everybody agrees to say more than once that means something. That's a religion. You've found a religion. Ta-da! This is spoon. We have a religion of spoon right now. It's a very small and a very boring religion, but we have it. We both believe this is a spoon. To somebody else, that's a very bad knife. Whatever. Yeah. I wish people wouldn't be so refusing of that word. We won't have any religion. Hell no, we won't go. It's just a word. And so if you give it a pass, if you allow it to be a thing that you can okay, I could see, forming a new group of word sounds around certain things. And I could even see applying some terms that have some value that have resonated throughout history, like a 3-letter word starts with God. Maybe that'll give us something to reach beyond what we know and say it really quickly. Mm-hmm. Seems to be a philosophical tool. But they won't do that, at least not most. And then I get to realizing, well, maybe it's not for everybody, and I need to be okay with that. Yeah. I'm asking for them to be okay with me where I'm at, so why can't I be with them, okay with them where they're at, and pursue my path and seek for like minds? So when I see one, I try to jump into a conversation with them and say, hey, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Yeah. What do you think about having a community support center for, you saw the video, we talked a little bit about it, so I don't need to recap the whole thing, but what do you think about that?
I've been trying to figure out exactly what part of that I've been trying to put together for a while or become a part of, because there needs to be a meeting of minds that are interested in meeting. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a sharing of energy of those who wish to. I don't know that it needs a book or a building or a locality even. No. I think we're into a technological age, especially with some of these new things that are coming out with AR and VR and whatever. We're going to be able to share knowledge and everything else on a scale that we're not even comprehending right now.
Yeah, I hadn't even
And I
thought
feel
about
like,
the VR thing.
what's that?
I hadn't even considered the VR thing. I thought maybe like a Facebook group or something like that. But yeah, a VR community center. That
Yeah.
sounds pretty cool.
And if things go the way that they're talking, that's going to be kind of one of the new places in reality anyways. It's not going to be just a video game. It's going to be a place people go. There's going to be shopping. There's going to be games. There's going to be people meeting with each other's avatars and interacting with each other on that level of existence, which we're just barely becoming able to understand. And who's to say that's any more or less real than this is? Big questions.
Yeah.
But I think that there's huge doorways to making all of the things more possible than they ever were before, because a lot of the hindrances we've had before with time and travel and abundance of this, that, and the other thing, monetary stuff, whatever, I think it's going to be massaged. It's going to be shuffled. So yeah, I do believe that there needs to be some kind of a people who are willing to vibe together, to use the common speak, what have people say it these days, the lingo. But I don't know how. I'm still trying to figure that out. I had a vision that I was sharing with Placid actually about some kind of an art hub. There was a connection nexus where people could share some kind of a thing that allowed them to interact with other people in that world, so they could share ideas and art and energy and topics and whatever. But I don't know how that's supposed to come about. I just have the idea. But yes, I agree. So yes.
I wonder what the expense of running like a virtual reality community center would be. I mean, would you have to buy like a server and like obviously the goggles and stuff, but like the actual setup compared to a physical building? I mean, like what? I mean, is it just like setting up a website, but it's virtual reality?
Right now, I
It would
think
be
a
really
lot of that is
interesting
in
to think
its
about.
yeah. I think a lot of it's in its infancy, and I think a lot of those technologies are going to become like stone wheels in the Flintstones very soon. I think we're going to be a lot more integrated and a lot more AR in regular glasses that project things onto our hands, things that don't need to be worn so much even, but we'll see.
Yeah. Right now, I think, yeah, you're right. Because it feels like you could pick a platform that was like virtual reality world, but it's like an island. You're not reaching anybody outside of it. It's like going
Right.
to Mars and starting a community center there. It's like, well, what about the rest of the planet, Earth?
Right.
Nothing's integrated yet,
Well, the other
but
interesting, just a side element of that is think about the personalities that are different on the internet and social media world as opposed to real life. What happens when you form a spiritual group that's not there in their physical bodies? They're there in avatars. How do they present?
that
How do
would
they
be
explore?
that would be interesting to be a part of.
Yeah. I think a lot of these things too are good to start, even though it seems like just playing in the mind. I think that that's a good thing to do, because a lot of, I'm a fan of believing that a lot of this world is generated by what we think, babe. My Sasha Kitty's trying to knock down my phone. She's over here reaching up, trying to knock my phone down. But I think the more we start putting those thoughts into a framework, the more we'll start moving that direction. I used this analogy with somebody the other day because we were talking again about kind of, how do I frame it? Talking about fighting this impossible massive energy of people that all have things all set up and structured. And I'm like, it's kind of like being in a rave. If you've ever been to a rave with thousands of people,
No, never.
if you're squished body to body and there's nowhere to go ahead and try to go where you want to go. It ain't happening. But if you
Sounds
turn your head and
terrifying.
look, where you want to go, the crowd moves you. It's so weird
Oh, okay.
because somebody
Is that-
behind you wants to go that way.
That's interesting. It's kind of like being able to not hear anything until you look at someone's lips, and all of a sudden you
Yes.
can hear them.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And I think in this new situation, this is maybe a little woo for you, but this is where my mind sits with it. I really believe what we look for, we're going to find. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door is open. Just walk on through it. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's on both sides of that fence. So if we go looking for controversy and hatred and division, we're going to find it in spades.
Oh, yeah.
If we go looking for reasons to be depressed and to not want to try, we will find it. But if we get up every day and look for reasons to make things work, to connect, to find people who resonate, to hold that lantern up and say, yes, your path is worthy, let's do this, I believe that the world will respond with a yes. I believe it.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Like for the first time and since I left Christianity, I really feel like there's kind of like a path to like. I mean, TikTok has been awesome, and there have been a couple of opportunities to um get to know other faithists and stuff. But I really think it's time for people to get connected, especially people from other sort of backgrounds, but on the same journey, because we have a different sphere of influence, we have different backgrounds, and same journey, but with unique context. And then we can just kind of be that torch and not do anything else but shine, and
Right.
support each other.
I used to see an analogy posted in a meme that I thought was really effective because it was two people standing on different sides of an object in the middle, and one side was seeing that it was like a square or something, and the other person was seeing a triangle. And if you stood back, you could see it was just the way that the object was positioned. No matter where you were, it looked differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it because it gave me the idea to think, yeah, their perspective is different than mine. They're still seeing what they see as truth. But ultimately, there's this whole truth I wanted to say that we're not seeing together, and I wanted to find what that whole truth was. And I shifted that analogy just recently, a couple months back, to thinking not only is it valuable for people to stand in 4 different corners to hold up a house, but if they try to move to the center and stand in the same spot, nobody's going to be holding up their corner anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that it's the answer to everything. It's just that look for the ways to say yes to it in the time that you need it. Whatever situation you're in, like an actor showing up to a scene, if your scene is to play a certain role, play it and wholeheartedly play it and accept the other people in their roles for what they are. And when you move on from that scene, move on from it.
Yeah.
They're no longer the villain. They're no longer that corner, whatever, move on from it. But in this sense of people being in different perspectives, we don't necessarily have to all stand in the center or see the same thing. And we can still encourage each other in a same vein of spiritual generosity in a community that doesn't have to have a name or a banner or a handshake or anything like that. Like you can be a cohesive whole as individuals. And I think that that's what I hope for anyways.
Gotta have some secret handshakes.
That's right. I'm a Mason. I'll teach you a few.
Yeah.
My brothers heard me. They're coming.
It's interesting because I kind of feel like you can walk down the street or flip through TikTok or whatever, and it's like we're starting to recognize each other without words. People
Yes.
who it's like hello, brother.
Secret words and such and so on and so forth. Yeah.
You can just tell people who aren't ready for that or aren't on the growth journey. They just talk differently and think differently. They just behave differently.
Well, one of my greatest gifts too from this TikTok world has been understanding that everybody will come and go in cycles, and sometimes I'll think I know somebody and I'll find out that I don't, or that I didn't know all of them. And the part that I thought that was great was an initial meeting, and that didn't go away just because I found out something more of them. I just learned something more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to become okay with that. And I had to learn to be accepting of the difficult parts as questioning of myself. Like, what is it about what they're doing that I'm having a hard time with, and why? What gift are they bringing to me? What lesson? Yeah. So it's been an interesting experience. I had hoped it would be, but I had no idea how much I would learn from this silly little app.